And welcome back to Patience is a Virtue, the YouTube channel devoted to finding value in future sports wagering. My name is Andrew, and on today's episode, we're going to take a look at some bets for the 2025 Stanley Cup Finals between the Western Conference champion Edmonton Oilers and the Eastern Conference champion Florida Panthers. Now, this is actually a rematch of the 2024 Stanley Cup Finals between these two teams, in which Florida Panthers won 4 games to 3. And it played out interestingly, where Florida won the first 3 games, Edmonton then won the second 3 games, and then Florida closed out on home ice in Game 7. Now, this year, the Oilers have home ice, and the bookies are expecting a longer series. So, having that home ice, that might be an advantage for Edmonton looking ahead. Now, across the season series, the Panthers ended up winning both those games. They took place in December and February. So they were a little bit back, and they might not be indicative of how these two teams are playing right now. But it is important to note that that Florida was able to sweep the season series, and they were close games. They both ended up being 1-goal games. And it actually ended up playing out interestingly in December when the Florida Panthers won. The Oilers were in the midst of winning 8 out of 9 games. So it was a long winning streak for them, and the Florida loss was their only loss during that time period. And then in February, when they played, the Oilers lost 6 out of 7 games during that time, and that included losing to the Panthers. So both these games took place in the midst of some Oilers streaks. Shouldn't have any impact on this series here. Just thought it was quite interesting to note, as you don't usually see that. Now, on the injury side, a big note for the Oilers is that their left winger, Zach Hyman, he's actually going to be out for this whole series. Now, he is second on the team in scoring. He's fifth in points, and he's third on shots. So he is an important part of their offense, and I think they are going to miss him. Now, Edmonton really does lean more heavily on Leon Draisaitl, who has almost twice as many goals as the rest of the team, or as the next leading scorer, Hyman. So he really is their most important goal threat. And of course, they have Connor McDavid. So they should be fine on the offensive end, but still losing Hyman for this series will definitely have an impact, and it is going to lessen Edmonton's offense by at least a little bit. So that's definitely something that you want to keep in mind as you think about Edmonton being able to score goals and ultimately win games. Now, Florida, they have a little bit more of a balanced attack. They have 5 players who have at least 20 goals or more. Again, Edmonton has 4 players who have that, but as I said, Draisaitl has almost twice as many goals as their second leading scorer. So I think Florida is going to be better able to withstand any kind of injuries that might happen during the series, if there are any. And they do have a little bit more of a balanced attack, which can help them on a game-to-game basis. If one player is not performing well, they have other players who are going to be able to step up. If Draisaitl and or McDavid are not having a good game, it's going to be real tough for Edmonton to pull out a game in that series. So something to definitely keep in mind, especially if you're looking at this series on a game-to-game basis. Now, on the defensive side, Florida is led by their goaltender, Bobrovsky, and he has actually played every minute of these playoffs. Right now, he has a 2.11 goals against average, and he has a save percentage of .912. Edmonton, on the other hand, they've actually used 2 different goaltenders. They split time between Stuart Skinner, who's their starter, and Calvin Pickard. You take from that whatever you want. Really, it means that Edmonton is a little more likely to pull their goalies, and if they're losing, they're going to be losing big, whereas Florida is going to be riding Bobrovsky probably the entire time, and he really is an excellent goaltender. Skinner is too, but Bobrovsky should be able to keep Florida in some of these games. So I think it'll be less likely to pull their goalie in that sense, and he is playing really well, so he should anchor a pretty good Florida defense. So with all that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at the odds to win this series. Now, right now, the best price I can find on Edmonton is -110. That's over at DraftKings. And for Florida, you can find them at even money. That can be found at both BetMGM and at Bet365. Now, the bookies are expecting this to be a little bit of a longer series. The over 5.5 games line, which is a standard market that is offered for both NHL and NBA playoffs, generally speaking, it comes in at around a -200, and that's at pretty much all the major books. So the books expect it to be either 6 games or 7 games in total. And if we take a look at the exact game market, you can find the series to end in 6 exact games at +200 at DraftKings, and also in 7 games at plus 200 at DraftKings. Those are going to be the best prices. You're going down to maybe plus 195, plus 190, somewhere around there. So you're getting around plus 200 everywhere. And that really is showing that these teams are fairly evenly matched, and it's going to be hard to tell who's going to end up coming out on top. So one way you could play this is you could actually bet both of those two games, and you could guarantee yourself a profit. Again, if you bet them both at DraftKings, you know you're going to get the exact same amount of money. If you want to bet them at different books, bet one at DraftKings, maybe bet the other one at FanDuel or Bet365, something like that. You can adjust your amount size just to even them out, but you're going to be getting around the same price for those bets. And you can guarantee that if it goes 6 or 7 games, you're going to know that you're going to be able to get a profit. If you don't want to bet 2 bets, I would go ahead and just bet on game 6, because that's going to give you the ability to hedge if you choose to on either side of that. So if, for example, before game 5, you have a team that's up 3-1 and they could close out in game 5, you could consider placing a bet on that team, a money line bet on that team to win game 5 if you don't think it might make it to game 6. Or if the series is 3-2 on either side after game 5 and you're heading into game 6, which you're going to have, you could take a look at placing a bet that is going to guarantee that it's going to go to 7 games, depending on which team that is. So those are two different ways that you could hedge if you decide to just go with a bet on the series to end in exactly 6 games. Now, if you like Florida to ultimately come out and win the series, another bet that you might want to take a look at is the exact score bet in terms of the series. And that would be Florida to win 4-2. And you can find that as best price at plus 460 at FanDuel. The reason I like this is because game 6 will be on home ice for Florida. And therefore, if you think they're going to close out, there's a good chance that that's when they would be able to do that. And it's going to give you a little bit more value on a Florida money line bet instead of just taking them on the simple series money line. If you think it's going to go long, but you think Florida will ultimately win it, they're going to have a better chance of closing that out at home than they would in, say, game 7 up in Edmonton. So Florida to win the series 4-2 at plus 460 is another option for you. Now, if you think Edmonton has a good chance of winning the bet, I think you want to take a look at them doing well in the very beginning of the series, as I think it's going to be important for them to make sure that they maintain home ice. So 2 bets that you could take a look at is Edmonton to be leading 2-1 after 3 games. And best price on that is plus 135 at Bet365, thinking that Edmonton are going to be able to win at least one, maybe both of the 2 games in Edmonton, and then they'll go down to Florida, maybe lose that 3rd game. Or another way you could take a look at this, if you like Edmonton, is the series game 1 winner and then series winner double, which would be Edmonton to win game 1 and then also to win the series. And these are specific bets that you can find at the major sports books. They're all going to have this. And that comes in at plus 185 at DraftKings. Again, this goes along the idea that Edmonton are going to come out real fast, real strong, and take home ice, keep home ice, I guess I should say, take game 1. And then if they're able to get game 1, maybe game 2, they ought to be able to go on and win the series. At least hopefully they can. And if they're able to do that, then this is going to be pretty good value and obviously better than if you're just betting Edmonton on the simple series money line. Now, of course, all that being said, you could simply go ahead and just take one of these 2 teams on the series money line. They're both coming in at close to even money, so that won't be too hard to hedge if that is something that you choose to do. Really, what you ultimately need to do is take a look at the 2 teams and decide how you think the series is going to play out. If you think Edmonton are going to be able to jump out to a lead, maybe hold serve on home ice, then you want to place a bet on Edmonton to win the series before the series starts. And then you can come back and maybe take a look at hedging back on Florida between games 2 and 3 before it goes home. If you think Florida is going to be able to get at least one of those 2 games, you ought to be able to get a pretty good price on them if they're down 0-2. If ever you like Florida, you might want to wait and see what happens during the first 2 games. You can place a bet on Florida before the series starts. And then if Florida are able to get 1 or 2 of the games, and then they're going to be switching to home ice, you ought to be able to get a pretty good price on Edmonton. So again, that's thinking ahead as to how you might want to hedge if that's something that you want to do. You could always just take a look at both these 2 teams, pick the one that you think is going to win, and go ahead and just write it out. Now, again, if you also think that it's going to be a longer series, you could look at more specific bets. So you could take one of those two teams on the money line. For example, you could take Edmonton on the money line, or you could also take Florida to win uh, 4-2 or Florida win in game 6, right? So if you think if Florida isn't going to be able to do it, it is going to be a longer series. They're going to be more likely to close out at home. So you'd be able to get Edmonton at about minus 110 if you bought it now. And again, Florida, the best price on Florida 4-2, I believe was 460 over at FanDuel. Again, that's going to create a nice little hedge area where you can certainly guarantee a profit either way. Obviously, Florida have to win 4-2. That can be a little bit more difficult to predict that, but that is ways that you can take a look at it and try to exploit a little bit of inefficiencies within the market between these two teams. And that's going to do it for this episode. Always remember to gamble responsibly, never bet more than you can afford to lose, and remember, patience is a virtue.